Thank you so much. What a great crowd we have. Thank you for coming out on is it a Sunday? Thank you for coming out on a Sunday. You know, first I want to thank the Manning family for opening this up and giving us the opportunity to be here. I want to thank David. I want to thank, when ag is such an important part of your state, having the right leader matters. South Carolina was an agricultural state, and we had to partner with our agricultural secretary every day because when that fuels your economy, you want someone who's strong, you want someone who gets the fact that they have to serve, and you want someone who's forward-thinking. And you've got that with Mike. You are blessed. Keep him going. Keep your back on him because he's going to continue to do a great job. So how many of you are coming to hear me at a town hall for the first time? Where have y'all been?
Happy Hanukkah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Look, I was born and raised in a small rural town in South Carolina. 2,500 people, 2 stoplights. You couldn't think about doing something wrong without somebody already telling your mom. My mom started a business out of the living room of our home. 30 plus years later, it was a successful company. I started doing the books for the family business when I was 13. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized that was child labor. I'm not an Ivy Leaguer. I went to a public university. I went to Clemson University, go Tigers, graduated with a degree in accounting. Accountants are problem solvers. No offense to our lawyers. And I went on and worked in the corporate world, and then I came back home to the family business. And one day I was telling my mom how hard it was to make $1 and how easy it was for government to take it. And my mom said, quit complaining about it, do something about it. I truly did not know you weren't supposed to run against a 30-year incumbent in a primary. Ignorance is bliss. I'd never been politically active. Once I realized he was related to half the district, the only option was to win. So I went around the district and said, we have way too many lawyers at the State House. I think it's time they had a really good accountant. And the district took a chance on me, and we won. When I got into office, I really focused on small businesses. Small businesses are the heartbeat of our economy. And so I fought many years working for things that small businesses would appreciate. And South Carolina typically voted on things by voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. But one day they pushed through a bill that would give legislators a pay raise. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, silence. The ayes have it, yet to this day you can't find one legislator that said they voted themselves a pay raise. I was furious because we had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican governor. And I filed a bill that said anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate is important enough for people to know how their legislators voted. And the Speaker of the House said, put the bill away. We don't need to have it. We will decide what the public needs to see and what they don't. Long story short, when I refused to put the bill away, they stripped me of everything. I lost all my seniority. I was taken off my committees. I could go to the well. No one would hear me speak. I could sponsor a bill. No one would co-sponsor. So I ran for governor. And I'm proud to say one of the first bills I signed into law is now in South Carolina. Anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate requires a legislative vote on the record, and we took it a step further, and we did it on every section of the budget as well. And you were listening to my playlist, I Love Music, and on the day of the bill signing, we blasted throughout the State House, Pat Benatar's Hit Me With Your Best Shot. When I became governor, South Carolina was hurting. We had 11% unemployment. We had thousands of people on welfare. And South Carolina was the butt of the jokes. And so we got to work. By the time I left, we were building planes with Boeing. We were building more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought in Mercedes-Benz. We brought in Volvo, 5 international tire companies. They were referring to us as the beast of the Southeast, which I still love. We moved that 11% unemployment down to 4%. We announced jobs in every county in the state. But we also acknowledged a truth. If you have to show picture ID to buy Sudafed, if you have to show picture ID to get on a plane, you should have to show picture ID to protect the integrity of the election process. We passed voter ID in South Carolina. We passed one of the toughest illegal immigration laws in the country. We passed tort reform. We paid down our debt. We built up our coffers. We took care of our veterans. And we were able to get South Carolina proud again. And by the time I left, South Carolina was named the friendliest state in the country, the most patriotic state in the country, and the #2 state in the country that people were moving to. And then I got the call for the United Nations. And my honest answer was, I don't even know what the UN does. I just know everybody hates it. I wasn't wrong about that. But when I went to the UN, I made a point to tell countries what America was for and what America was against. I didn't care if they didn't like me, but I wanted them to respect America. So we got to work. We pulled ourselves out of the Iran deal. I pushed China to pass the largest set of sanctions against a country in a generation with North Korea, and we stopped their ballistic missile testing. We moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and acknowledged the truth. But the biggest thing that we did was we took the kick me sign off of our backs, and America was respected again at the UN. Now I'm running for president. And you don't have to turn on the news to know how bad things are. You feel it when you go to the grocery store. You feel it when you fill up your car with gas. You feel it with your mortgage payment, your insurance payments. The things that we need are so much more expensive. Now, I would love to tell you that Biden did that to us, and he sent us down the socialism creep that's dangerous. But I've always spoken in hard truths, and I'm going to do that with you today. Our Republicans did that to us too. You go back and look at that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill that they passed with no accountability, that has now left us with 100 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. That's a third of our country. And did Republicans try and make it right? Nope. They went and opened up earmarks and pet projects for the first time in 10 years, pushing through 7,000 of them last December. Want to know how they spent your money? $30 million on an honors college in Vermont, $10 million to tear down a hotel in Alaska, $7.5 million on a courthouse in Colorado, and the list goes on. In the 2024 appropriations budget, Republicans put in $7.4 billion worth of pet projects and earmarks. Democrats put in $2.8 billion. Now you tell me who the big spenders are. All while 1 in 6 American families can't afford their utility bill, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, 50% of American families can't afford diapers, Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years, Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. Then you look at our education system. Everybody wants to blame COVID for education. We had problems with education before COVID. Do you know right now in America, only 31% of 8th graders are proficient in reading? 31%. Only 27% of 8th graders are proficient in math. If we don't do something about this, we're going to be in a world of hurt 10 years from now. And then you go look at what's happening on the border. And I've honestly run out of words when it comes to that. It is an absolute dereliction of duty what's happening on the border. Now, I've been to the border, and I didn't go pull a Kamala and come back. I went 400 miles down that border. You're not ready for what I saw. Mounds of clothes, mounds of shoes, paraphernalia, rape areas that the women and girls have to walk through. When you get up in the morning, you get your coffee and you watch the news. When these ranchers get up in the morning, they get their coffee and they go see if anybody died crossing the fence. They pick up whatever little kids are left behind and turn them over to Border Patrol. I met with multiple sheriffs. They said before 7 a.m. they round up whatever illegal immigrants they can find. They turn them over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol documents them and releases them until their court date years from now. And when I asked Border Patrol about their job, they said, "You want to know what we do? We're glorified babysitters. They don't let us do our job." 8 million illegal immigrants have crossed that border. We've had more fentanyl cross the border last year that would kill every single American. Number one cause of death for adults 18 to 45, fentanyl. And don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing when they send it over. And then my parents always taught me, you take care of those who take care of you. I'm going to ask you if we're taking care of those who take care of us. Right now in America, over 33,000 veterans are homeless that we know of. 1 in 3 veterans suffers from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We lose 22 heroes a day to suicide. If a veteran needs a doctor's appointment, on average, it takes 29 days. Why 29 days? Because on the 30th day, they can go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. So midway through the 29 days, they get a call to reschedule, and the clock starts all over again. It's shameful how we treat our veterans. That's a lot of bad, right? It's hard to find anything good. Have you seen any activity coming out of D.C.? Don't you think it's time we finally had term limits in America? Don't you think it's time we finally had mental competency tests for anyone over the age of 75? Now let me say this. When I say that, I'm not being disrespectful. We all know people who are over 75 that can run circles around us. Senator Grassley's a perfect example of that. But then we know Joe Biden. The reason this matters, I don't care if you do this for everybody 50 and up. The reason this matters is these are people making decisions on our national security. These are people making decisions on the future of our economy. We need to know they're at the top of their game. So while that was a lot of bad, now I'm going to tell you what I told South Carolinians when I became governor. No more whining. No more complaining. Now we get to work. How do we fix it? When it comes to the economy, we start by clawing back to over $100 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud. 1 out of every $7 was fraudulent. If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing, cut up the credit cards. You have to balance a budget every day. I had to balance a budget as governor. Why is Congress the only group that refuses to balance a budget? Do you know their number one job is to make sure they put out a budget on time that pays for government? Do you know Congress has only put out a budget on time 4 times in 40 years? I think we say if you can't get a budget out on time, you don't get paid. We stop that. I will stop the borrowing, I'll stop the spending, we'll eliminate the earmarks, and I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That will save us trillions. And then we need to start looking at opening up the middle class. Right now in America, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The middle class needs to breathe. That's why I'm going to eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax in this country. We're going to cut taxes on the middle class and simplify those brackets. We're going to make the permanent tax cuts, we're going to make tax cuts for small businesses permanent. They made the corporate tax cuts permanent, but they made the small business tax cuts temporary. Small businesses are the heartbeat of our economy. We will make those permanent. And then what I know as governor is presidents typically meet with governors once a year. I will meet with our governors once a quarter, Republican and Democrat, with the sole purpose of taking as many federal programs as we can and moving them down to the state level. That way you reduce the size of the federal government, but you empower people on the ground. Do you know right now, 70% of federal employees are still working from home 3 years after COVID? Over 75% of most of our federal agencies are sitting empty. We're paying for that. We've got to start righting the ship. That's how we'll get it back on track. Then when it comes to education, we knew if a child couldn't read by 3rd grade in South Carolina, they were 4 times less likely to graduate high school. So we started holding kids back, not pushing them forward. We brought in their parents. We did reading remediation. We set them up for success. We have got to do this all over our country. We've got to get our kids reading again. If we don't do that, we'll be in a world of hurt. And no parent should ever wonder what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. We need complete transparency in the classroom. Let's go back to the basics. Math, reading, science, history, the arts. Those are the things that matter to our kids. Right now, God bless our teachers. They're making them be the guidance counselor, the parent, the pastor, and everything in between, and saying, oh, and by the way, teach to a test. That's why we're losing teachers by the day. They're not getting to do what they actually went to school to do. Then let's make sure that every parent has the ability to choose which school their child goes to. As parents, we've got one job, and that's to get our kids right. Every child deserves a good education. Stop mandating where they go to school based on a zip code. Give parents that right. And then finally, let's start building things in America again. Let's put vocational classes back into our high schools. In South Carolina, we had apprenticeships all over our state. We taught our kids how to build the things we were making. It got them invested in our economy even before they got out. And then I'll say this as a point of personal privilege. For all you girl dads out there and all you strong moms, we have to raise strong girls. Strong girls become strong women. Strong women become strong leaders. None of that happens if you have biological boys playing in women's sports. We've got to cut that out. I had a daughter who ran track in high school. I don't even know how I would have that conversation with her. How are we supposed to get our girls to get used to biological boys in their locker room? You can't. Stop doing it. And then when it comes to the border, we'll do what I did in South Carolina, but we'll go national with it. We will do a national E-Verify program that requires businesses to prove that the people they hire are in this country legally. We will go and defund sanctuary cities once and for all and get rid of the safe haven that illegals have to come here. We will make sure we put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. And we will go back to the Remain in Mexico policy and let them process in Mexico and never step foot on U.S. soil. And instead of catch and release, we'll go to catch and deport. That's what will bring an end to our border situation. And when it comes to our veterans, we all see the images when our men and women deploy and the tears that are shed. And then we see the images when, God willing, they come back home to us safely, and the prayers that are answered. I'm the wife of a combat veteran. When Michael returned back home from Afghanistan, it was prayers answered. It was a great day. But that was the easy part. It's when we got home that life got hard. He couldn't hear loud noises. He couldn't be in crowds. Life had passed him by for the year that he was gone, and the transition was tough. We can't just love our men and women when they're gone. We got to love them when they come back home, too. Let's do better in that transition. Let's make sure we're doing more for them than just taking care of them for 2 weeks when they get stateside. And let's do telehealth. Let them have the mental health care they need right when they need it. That's hugely important to them. And they should be able to go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. They have earned that right. And the way I think we take care of veteran health care, I think every member of Congress should have to get their health care from the VA, and you watch how fast that gets fixed. It cracks me up because it would be the best health care you've ever seen. You know that. So we have the answers to the domestic policy. But I want to remind you, there were 2 things at the United Nations that Russia, China, and Iran never wanted us to have. They never wanted us to have a strong military, and they never wanted us to be energy independent. We won't just be energy independent. We will be energy dominant. All of the above, including biofuels. We should turn our energy sector into a powerhouse. Export as much liquefied natural gas as we can. Pull the EPA back. Right now, they're spending more time taking care of sagebrush lizards than they are about making sure Americans can pay their power bill. Let's speed up the permitting process. Let's make sure that we're focused on partnering with our producers and not demonizing our producers. And let's get it to where we no longer go hat in hand to Saudi Arabia or get dirty oil from Iran or Venezuela. That's going to be hugely important to our national security. Now, we've talked a lot about domestic policy, but now I do want to talk about national security and the foreign policy situation we have. The world is on fire. You've got a war in Europe. You've got a war in the Middle East. You've got North Korea testing ballistic missiles. You've got China on the march. But make no mistake, none of that would have happened had we not had that debacle in Afghanistan. The idea that my husband and his military brothers and sisters who served there had to watch us leave Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that told our enemies. And now, what do you hear coming out of Washington? They're saying, do you support Ukraine or do you support Israel? Do you support Israel or do you support closing our border? Don't let them lie to you like that. That's a false premise. Let's take it one by one and I'll tell you why. Let's start with Ukraine. You should know, during my time at the United Nations, they were one of our best friends. They voted with us on everything. They supported everything we did without even being asked. Here you have this pro-American, freedom-loving country who was invaded by a thug. 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And they're fighting for their very survival. Now, I'll be the first one to say, I don't think we should ever give cash to any country, period, because you can't follow it, you can't hold it accountable. And I don't think we put troops on the ground. Ukrainians don't want our troops. They want to win this on their own. but they need to have the equipment and ammunition to win. And what makes me so mad is when Russia surrounded Ukraine, if Biden had done what he was supposed to in the first place, they never would have invaded. If the U.S. and our allies had given them all the equipment and ammunition they needed in the beginning, this war would be over. Russia had hit rock bottom. Ukraine is an amazing military force. We know they hit rock bottom because Russia raised the draft age to 65. They were getting drones from Iran. They were getting missiles from North Korea. The reason, if you ask, why should we care about Ukraine? It's a legitimate question. Why should we care about Ukraine? It's because dictators tell us exactly what we're going to do. Dictators, thugs, and terrorists have always done that. They're actually very transparent. Hamas said they were going to invade Israel. China said they were going to invade Hong Kong. We watched it. Russia said they were going to invade Ukraine. They did. China says Taiwan is next. We better believe them. Russia said after Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries. That puts America at war. This is about preventing war. That's the number one goal, is war prevention. We never want to go to war. So in order to stop it, Ukraine has to win. Now, the support that we have given Ukraine is only 3.5% of our defense budget. The Europeans have given more to Ukraine, and they should. It's their neighborhood. Now let's go to Israel. I'm haunted by what happened October 7th. And the reason I'm haunted is because I gave a speech 5 years ago to the entire world. And the speech was about the fact that we knew there were maps. And the maps were held by Hamas. And it showed that if they could break that barrier, this is how they were going to kill as many Jews as fast as they could. And it happened. It has never been that Israel needs America. It has always been that America needs Israel. Israel is the tip of the spear when it comes to defeating terrorism. It's a bright spot in a tough neighborhood. God help us if we don't get this right. Why should we care about Israel? Legitimate question. Because when they went and beheaded those people and burned those babies alive and raped those girls at the concert and dragged their naked bodies down the streets of Gaza, what did they say? Death to Israel, death to America. There would be no Hamas without Iran. There would be no Hezbollah without Iran. There wouldn't be the Houthis without Iran. And they have always wanted to destroy us, always. And everybody, I saw this at the UN all the time, everybody goes to Israel's defense when she's hit. But everybody attacks Israel when she hits back. Do you think we wouldn't hit back if that happened to us? And these other candidates are telling you that this is Israel's war, it's not America's war? This should be personal for us. They butchered 33 Americans. They have American hostages right now. Now, if we took care of Ukraine and Israel, again, they're asking for equipment and ammunition. They themselves want to fight. They don't want U.S. troops on the ground. If we took care of Ukraine and Israel, that's only 5% of our defense budget. Now, if we secure the border, that should be priority number one. America continues to act like it's September 10th. And we better remember what September 12th felt like. It only takes one. Now, if we secure our border and we support Ukraine and we support Israel, that's less than 20% of Biden's green subsidies. So don't let them tell you we can't. This is about priorities. And the number one priority for government is to protect the American people and national security in that process. So now let's talk about, which one do I want to go to? Let's talk about the fact that Russia, I told you, had hit rock bottom, right? I want you to start to see the connection. When Russia hit rock bottom, Hamas invaded Israel on October 7th, Putin's birthday. Who is the happiest person in the world right now? Putin. Why? Because what did America do? We shifted from Ukraine and we turned towards Israel. It's exactly what they wanted. When Israel got hit, did Putin call Netanyahu? No, he waited 10 days. What did he do? He invited Hamas to Russia. See the connection. See what happened there. Now let's go to our number one national security threat, China. China has been preparing for war with us for years, and that's not an exaggeration. They've already infiltrated our country. They've bought 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base, where our most sensitive drone technology is. They're pouring millions of dollars into our universities, stealing our research and spreading Chinese propaganda. Everybody got upset about the Chinese spy balloon, right? And rightfully so. What about the fact that 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese? Now just think of the infiltration and the surveillance that's happening all over our country. We've had more Americans die of fentanyl than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined. We lost 75,000 Americans last year to fentanyl. And there are technologies we never want China to have because it builds up their military and it threatens America. Yet the Biden administration approved 70% of it last year. And China is building up their military at a scary pace. They now have 500 nuclear warheads. That's 100 more than they had last year. They have the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 370 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. They're doing cyber. They've developed hypersonic missiles. We've barely gotten started. And now China's the lead developer on neurostrike weapons. Weapons engineered to change the brain activity of military commanders and segments of the population. That's who we're dealing with. So don't let Biden and Yellen tell you that China is a competitor. I dealt with China every day at the United Nations. They never saw us as a competitor. They always saw us as an enemy. We have to start looking at China the way they look at us. So how do we fix China? First, you stop selling any U.S. soil to China and you take back the land they've already purchased. Secondly, we go to our universities and we say, you either take foreign money or you take American money, but the days of taking both are over. We get that infiltration out of our universities. We go and basically say, all that technology that they have is blacklisted. We don't let them have one single bit of it if it's going to build their military and threaten us. And we will go and say, we're going to end all normal trade relations with you until you stop murdering Americans with fentanyl. You watch how fast they move because they need our economy. And then we focus on getting a strong military again. Strong militaries don't start wars. Strong militaries prevent wars. Let's modernize our military. And that doesn't mean throwing a ton of money at the Department of Defense. It actually means cleaning it up, getting rid of the bureaucracy, getting them to stop playing favorites with defense companies, making sure we're modernizing. We've got too many generals looking back at past wars. We need people looking at the threats in the future, cyber, space, artificial intelligence. We've got to get up on top of that. Hypersonic missiles, hugely important that we catch up on that. When we look to the future and get strong, that will make the difference. And for the military's sake and their morale, for goodness sake, we have got to stop these gender pronoun classes that are happening in our military. It's ruining it. Now, I want to talk about that one thing that's personal to Iowa, because y'all do a lot of agricultural trade with China. If you know China's not a good actor, our goal is getting in front of it, right? I've always thought if China pulled the rug out from under us tomorrow, would we be ready? That's how we build on our alliances. India, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Israel, all of those. Let's move the trade that you're doing with China. Let's move it over to those countries. Let's move it to India. Let's make sure they just gave themselves $1 billion stimulus to become less dependent on China. Japan did the same thing. If we go and start moving that trade over, I think a president should be a salesperson. I was a salesperson when I was governor of South Carolina. I sold our products out to the world and that's how we became an economic powerhouse. We will continue to do ag trade, but let's not do it with China. Let's start doing it with our friends so that they can't pull the rug out from under us. That's how we'll get it done. Okay, so China and Russia, remember a year before they invaded, called themselves unlimited partners. Powerful words for two countries to say. I told you about Putin and Iran and the connection we had there. A win for Russia is a win for China. We have to remember that. It's China, Russia, and the junior partner, Iran. There's a reason the Taiwanese want the U.S. and the West to support Ukraine. Why? Because if Ukraine wins, China doesn't invade Taiwan. There's a reason the Ukrainians want the U.S. and the West to support Israel. Why? Because they know if Iran wins, Russia wins. These three are all connected in their hatred towards freedom and the West and their hatred against America. When you see the connection of those dots, that's why we have to care. It's preventing war. So we have the answers to the domestic side. We have the answers on the national security side. But the first thing we have to do is end this national self-loathing that's killing our country. The idea that people say America's bad or rotten or racist. I was elected the first female minority governor in history. America's not racist, we're blessed. Our kids need to know to love America. They need to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance when they start school every day. You know, 5 months ago, I dropped my husband Michael off at 4 a.m. for another year-long deployment. And I watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings to go to a country they'd never been, all in the name of protecting America. They're willing to sacrifice their lives and their families because they still believe in this amazing experiment that is America. So if they're willing to fight for us there, shouldn't we be willing to fight for America here? Because we have a country to save. But in order to do that, we've got to acknowledge some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That's nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. But the only way we're going to do that is if we have a new generational leader who leaves the negativity and the chaos behind us. Another hard truth. I think President Trump was the right president at the right time. I think he broke a lot of things that needed to be broken. I had a good working relationship with him when I was at the United Nations. I agree with a lot of his policies. But rightly or wrongly, chaos follows him. Chaos follows him. You know I'm right. And we can't have a country in disarray and a world on fire and go through 4 more years of chaos. We won't survive it. You don't defeat Democrat chaos with Republican chaos. We have to get this right. And not only that, you look at these general election polls. The caucus is important. These primaries are important. But what's our end game? You look at these general election polls. Wall Street Journal, he told you about before. On any given day, Trump and Biden are even. On a good day, he's up by 2, he might be up by 4. It's all margin of error. In every one of those polls, I was up by 10 to 13. Now I'm up by 17 points. So what does that mean for you? Think about it. That means wins up and down for our governors, for our Senate seats, for our House seats. But that means an economy that gets back on track because we have the landslide victory. That means an education system that goes back to the basics and gets our kids reading again. That means a border that finally gets closed once and for all. That means that crime comes down on our streets because we have the backs of our law enforcement and we force our prosecutors to prosecute according to the law. And that means that you will live again in America that's strong and proud because we will have a mandate to do that. That's what that means. So let's get it done. So we're 36 days away from the caucus. Y'all know how to do this? This is my first time. But I'll tell you this. When I announced, someone asked me why I was doing this. And I said, you know, my parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that country again. I'm doing this for my husband, Michael, and his military brothers and sisters. They need to know their sacrifice matters. They need to know that we love our country. I'm doing this for my daughter who just got married. And I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. The average homeowner in America right now is 49. And I'm doing this for my son, who's a senior in college. And I am tired of watching him write papers of things he doesn't believe in just to get an A. That's not us. That's not America. You know I'm right. And right now, 81% of Americans don't think their kids are going to live as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. I'm not okay with that. We do have a country to save. But I'll tell you this, if you will join me in this fight and join me in the momentum that we can feel on the ground, I promise you that our best days are yet to come. Thank you very much. God bless you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So we will do this. I will tell you, first of all, you've been so kind to listen to me. Now we're going to turn the mics on you. We should have 2 guys that have microphones. Billy's over here, Andrew's over here. If you just raise your hand high, they will come find you. There's nothing I won't answer. You might not like my answer, but there's nothing I won't answer. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I live 20 miles north of here in Boone County. I'm a farmer. This was my 50th harvest this year. It was very
God
good.
bless you.
God blessed us very well.
God bless you.
Ethanol is very important to us here in the Midwest, especially Iowa, and it is also the most environmentally friendly fuel that we could produce. You talked about producing our fuel. I want to know some of your thoughts on sustainable aviation fuel, which I think would be a real big plus for everyone, and using E15 fuel year-round.
Thank you. And, I'll start by saying food security is national security. We always need to remember that. You will have my support all the way through. I agree with the E15. I have no problem with that. We want to bolster everything we can when it comes to biofuels. It's an opportunity waiting to happen. We need to make the most of it. So all of those things that affect you, whether it's the renewable fuel standard, whether it's making sure that we don't have the EPA pushing a water bill down your throat, whether it's any of those things, we will be partners. That's what I was in South Carolina, partners, so that not only are we going to produce a lot here in America, we're going to make sure we can get it out across the world so that it becomes a major economic outlet. I mean, I can't say enough. If you are so blessed to have this, why would we not use it to strengthen our country? Because that's what it does. So yes, you will have that. When it comes to the aviation fuel, of course we want to make sure that we have sustainable fuel, but let's talk about the fact what we don't need to be pushing are these electric cars that we see. I mean, that we need to pull back the $500 billion in green subsidies that Biden did. It's ridiculous for multiple reasons. First of all, you go and you have this green subsidy bill that says we're going to have all electric cars by 2030. Did anybody think, oh, but wait, 70% of those batteries are made in China, so we just are giving them a ton of money to our enemy? Not only that, did anybody think that even if we got to 2030, we don't have the infrastructure? And I'm not just talking about charging stations. That's the easy part. Electric vehicles are incredibly heavy. Our roads and bridges wouldn't be able to withstand if all of us went electric by 2030. So there was no common sense put in that at all. And you turned around and you benefited China in the process. Another one, that chips bill that they did, where they went and they gave all this money to American companies to produce chips for us. I don't agree with corporate subsidies. I've never agreed with corporate subsidies, but look at the flaw in this one. You went and gave money to these chip companies to manufacture chips to help us become less dependent on China. But you didn't make these American companies stop manufacturing in China. So you didn't do anything to hurt our enemy. You just tried to level the playing field with us. All of those things are not well thought of, and you have to think really hard before you give anybody extra money for those things, because honestly, nobody wants to buy electric vehicles, and if you do buy them, they're expensive. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Teresa DeVries. We drove 2.5 hours from Nebraska to come and see you.
Oh, wow. Welcome to Iowa.
Our Constitution is a great document. It identified 3 branches of government, but we have a 4th branch of government that cares nothing about we the people. What are your plans to do about the 4th branch?
What are you talking about, the 4th, the bureaucracy?
The bureaucracy.
This is not what I say, it's what I've done. When I became governor of South Carolina, I replaced the head of every agency, whether they were doing a good job or not, because I wanted to freshen it up. Then I sent people into every agency, I'll do the same as president, people into every agency to clean it up, Pull down old regs, pull down bureaucracy, get rid of problem children. You have to know how to do that. In some cases, we tweaked agencies. In other cases, we gutted agencies. Then we went back to the mission of the agency. The heads of each agency, we put in people like in agribusiness. If we were going to have agriculture, you put someone in agribusiness who knows the challenges and the success points of farmers. If you have a veterans agency, you make sure you have a veteran who's lived and dealt with all of that to go and fix it. You have to have people who've lived it. So then we tweaked agencies, we gutted agencies. Then we went and saw that they were spending money every year because they were worried they weren't going to get the same amount the next year. And so we made everything transparent, and we put every bit of that spending online for the taxpayers to see. And then we incentivized them to start giving money back to the taxpayers. And magic happened. They started to compete against each other. And that set the tone for the legislature. That's what I'll do as president. That will set the tone for Congress, because then you say, now it's your turn. And then you give Congress a couple of easy things to pass. Remind them what it's like to win again and make a big deal about it. I did that with my legislature. And then you go to harder things. And that's how we were able to do it. In South Carolina, the average legislator was elected when I was 7 years old. I already told you they hated me because I required them to start putting their votes on the record. And, by the way, I was the first woman, so oh my God, it's a girl. I had to earn that tone at the top. So you do it by what you can control first. If you don't clean out your agencies, you will have more and more problems. It's the first thing you ever do when you become the head of anything. I did that at the United Nations, too. When I got to the United Nations, you'll appreciate this. When I got to the United Nations, my first week, when you're drinking out of a fire hydrant, all of a sudden, one of the employees at the U.S. mission of the United Nations got on the phone with the reporters and told them what my agenda would be. None of it was anything I had said or planned to do. I told my staff, I said, find out who that is. I want them fired. You're not going to believe who it was. It was John Kerry's sister. I kid you not. John Kerry's sister. She worked at the U.S. mission of the United Nations. And they said, it's John Kerry's sister. And I said, I don't care. I want to fire her. And they said, you can't. She's here for 6 more months. I said, you take her key pass, you take her computer, I will pay her to sit home for 6 months. And that's what we did. You have to set the tone at the top. All right, where are my...
Right
Andrew?
back over here, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, sir. Love your shirt.
So do I. Thank you. I wanted to say that I've been supporting you since before you even announced running for president. And
Thank you.
it's my belief you were the first one in this nominating process to talk about the national debt and how destructive it is. It's my firm belief that until we tackle that, everything else is moot. And I'm just curious if you would agree with that point.
It is, and what makes me nervous, and everybody should feel this, is the amount of interest that we're paying. In a few years, it's going to surpass our defense budget. You know who notices that? Russia, China, and Iran. You know what happens to the strength of the dollar? It goes all the way down. That's what makes us a superpower. The strength of our dollar has always been a big deal. That's why our sanctions work. When we cut the sanctions, that's what we have to do. So we have to strengthen the dollar. Not only that, because we want to do this for our children and our grandchildren. Why should they now look and see the average homeowner's 49? That's the American dream out of reach. You never spend more than you make. We know that in households. We know that in businesses. We've got to get that straight when it comes to our economy. Does that mean it's going to be easy? I think this is going to be a miserable 8 years for me. But what I will do is communicate everything I know to you. You should know everything. And if we make the hard decisions, and if we go and do this right, we will leave a glorious future for our kids. America has an amazing ability to self-correct. Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom to know where up is. We're there. And the economy is the first place we start. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Nikki, my name is John Winter. My wife, Chris, and I are from Boone, which you were at not too long ago.
Yes.
I really appreciate your support of veterans. I'm a 20-year Navy guy.
God bless you.
very
Thank
much.
you for your service.
My question is, our Department of Justice and FBI have been politicized. We have all these woke prosecutors around the country. You touched on crime, but I think that's probably something that touches everybody in this room. And what are you going to do about that? How's it going to be a priority?
Thank you for your service. And I'll tell you, right now in America, people are worried about letting their child ride their bike down the street. They're worried about getting carjacked at a restaurant. And the ones that I worry about the most is the morale of our law enforcement. Because they went through this whole issue of defund the police, right? But then after that happened and people realized, oh, you better not because you might need it, what missed was if they're going and taking a stolen gun off the streets, they go to a lot of effort to get this person, get that gun, put them in jail. But do you know how demoralizing it is when a prosecutor turns around and lets them go the very next day? It makes them think it's not worth it. Our prosecutors have to prosecute according to the law. You have to have law and order in your country, or it will all be out of control. That goes for the border too, because to me that's right there in there when you look at crime. But if we don't start really getting down to these prosecutors and making sure that we have the backs of our law enforcement, that's what makes it spiral out. Let's go back to accountability. We've got some law enforcement people in the room. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you. The other thing, it's further down the line, but I think it's important. Once you prosecute, once they're in jail, when I was governor, it was really important for me. I wanted to know how people got in jail, what happened to them when they were there, and what happened after they left. To see, because you always have, it's like a recurring cycle of in and out of jail. And what we did, I went to maximum security prisons, I went to men's prisons, I went to women's prisons, I went to all of them. We completely reformed our correction system. So what happened was we started putting computer classes. We started putting resume building. We taught them financial planning. We taught them family planning. We did faith-based care if they wanted it. But we put equipment behind the fence, and we taught them a skill. Now in South Carolina, when someone leaves the fence, they've got a job to go to the next day. We have the lowest recidivism rate in the country. That's how you fix it. When you lift up the least of these, that's when you really get your country moving again. Where am I looking? Andrew. Yes.
I have
Yes, ma'am.
a couple of questions. One is the Medicare and Social Security and what you're going to do about that with people who are already on it. And then the other one is like when you get up against like people like in Congress and everything, when it's divided, how do you get things passed that you're talking about doing with that?
Both great questions. Every candidate in this race has said they're not going to do entitlement reform, meaning touching Social Security or Medicare. If you know Social Security is going bankrupt in 10 years, if you know Medicare is going bankrupt in 8, does that mean you're going to get into office, serve your 4 or 8 years, and leave it bankrupt for the next person? We can't do that. We've got to acknowledge it and make sure that it's there. So I believe we have to do entitlement reform. But that doesn't mean any of you should fear it, because I think America needs to keep her promises. Everybody that's paid in should know they're going to get it. The way you do entitlement reform is you get in front of it, and you change the rules for those like my kids in their 20s, and everybody new coming in the system. And we will tell them we're going to raise the retirement age for you up to life expectancy. Instead of cost of living increases, we'll do increases based on inflation. We will limit the benefits on the wealthy. They all talk about how they don't need the checks. Let's make sure that we give that money back in. And let's expand Medicare Advantage plans. Seniors love those because it creates competition and it lowers costs. That's how we'll get started on making sure that we take care of that. If we do that, our kids will actually have something when it comes down to it. But we don't have to hurt you to do it. We just have to acknowledge the hard truth that something has to be done. The second part is, how do you get Congress to do things? Well, if you win by 17 points, that's a pretty good mandate. So that would be the first start. But the second thing I'll tell you is, when I was governor, I had a Republican House and a Republican Senate, and sometimes that's even worse because they were butting heads constantly. And what I would do is I would pull them into my office and say, we're not leaving until we figure this out. And I wouldn't let them leave. We have to get them used to doing things. That's why I would have my agency start doing things first, and then we have to get Congress to do things. But I used the people to get Congress to do things. I communicated with my people all the time to tell them what I needed Congress to do, and they put the squeeze on them. When you get the people involved, that's when it matters. You know, people say, well, we all want term limits, but Congress is never going to pass it. I agree with you on that. But you know how we do it? There will be a Haley term limits pledge that every person has to sign when they file to run for office, whether they're an incumbent or otherwise. They will not have a choice. They can either sign or not sign. But guess what I do? I give you all of that information. So you will know exactly where candidates stand. You will be able to make the decision on what you want. And that is what pushes pressure for those to want to do term limits. Yes.
Hi, Nick. Well, first off, thank you for coming today again. Obviously not the first time I've met you. Very impressive lady.
Thank you.
I wanted to bring up about Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. He likes to claim that he's an amazing businessman to work with. If that was the case, why haven't any of his main business partners actually come out and endorsed him for his business skills? Nobody has come out and said he was amazing to work with, he was a great mentor, he changed my life for the better. Everybody says he screwed me here, he sued me there, he did this. It's just never ending. So I guess my main question is, how can you prove to the American people that you are a better business person than Trump?
Look, I have not been one that wants to get into the personal side of anything because I don't think it gets us anywhere, but I will talk about the policy side of things. From a policy perspective, we know that the economy was good under Donald Trump, right? But what we need to also remember was we went $9 trillion in debt during that same time. And we are paying the price for that. So there are issues. While I agree with a lot of his policies, there are a lot of things I don't agree with. I don't agree with how he had this free-for-all spending and allowed us to go into debt that is going to take us so long to get back out of. I don't agree that the fact that when he deals with foreign policy, he rewards dictators and thugs. You know, he praised Hezbollah when he was talking about that. He cut down Israel's prime minister at a time when Israel was on her knees. He was going over a past vendetta that he had. He says Kim Jong-un is his friend. He praised China. He congratulated them on their 70th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. And when COVID hit, he praised President Xi over a dozen times for how he handled it. Those are the issues I have a problem with, because that hurts us. That causes us problems later. Those things we have to get right. And now he's saying that he wants to pull out of certain wars. You've got to be careful, because the exact same way I told you we have to protect America, if you go and say you pull from Ukraine, I promise you a year from now they're going to want to pull from Israel, and all our enemies will win. So those are the things that I will change, is we'll make sure we put in policies that keep Americans safe and get our economy moving again. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Last question, make it a great one.
It's going to be the greatest question you've ever had in your entire life. I'm Jewish, and a bunch of us were caucusing at Maccabee's Delicatessen on Polk Boulevard. And by the way, you have an invitation. That's number one.
Thank you.
And I came out so strongly, and I'll tell you. And I said, you know why I like Nikki Haley? She reminds me of a young Golda Meir. Great for Israel and great for America. Here's the tough question. If you were President of the United States right now, what would you do to get our American hostages out? And what would you do to help Israel and the other countries get their hostages out?
3 things when it comes to Israel we should do. Give them whatever they need whenever they need it to finish this. Secondly, eliminate Hamas. Finish them once and for all. Don't weaken them, because they'll do it again. Finish them. And the third thing is we have to do whatever it takes to get our hostages home. And the way we do that is you don't do what Biden did and pay $6 billion for 5 hostages, because that will only make them want to take more hostages. You don't do what Biden is doing now, which is dictating to Israel what they can and can't do. We know, I've been in those tunnels. They're very sophisticated. Those terrorist tunnels, they can hold large amounts of equipment. They can hold ammunition. I promise you, I truly believe the hostages are in those tunnels. And I bet you Israel has an idea of where they are. The best way to do this is with strength. You have to scare Hamas to know, 1, you're not going to get money. And 2, there's going to be hell to pay if you hurt any one of our hostages. If we send that sign, that will make a difference. The other thing is you've had over 140 strikes on our men and women in Syria and Iraq. They have brain injuries because Biden didn't do his job. It's unforgivable. They need to, that's Iran doing that. We need to hit the infrastructure in Syria and Iraq that's hurting our soldiers. Hit it and hit it hard. You will send a chill up Iran's spine, and that's what gets them to stop. We've always seen if we punch them hard, it gets them to stop. And finally, you have to understand, Biden fell all over himself to get back into the Iran deal. And when he did that, he loosened the sanctions. And Iran has made billions of dollars off of selling their oil to China. And now that fueled all of their proxies, from the Houthis to Hamas to Hezbollah. We have to decimate their economy. Put those sanctions back on so that Iran feels it in such a way that they want to give our hostages back. We have the tools. We just have to use the tools to get it done. I'll leave you with this. First of all, thank you for your time. I want to say that when I told you I ran against that longest serving legislator in a primary, people laughed at me. And I got to work and I earned their support and we won. When I ran for governor, I actually ran against a lieutenant governor, an attorney general, a very popular congressman, and a state senator. I was Nikki who? I had 3% in the polls. I had the least amount of money. But I worked South Carolina like no one else, and we won. When I got to the United Nations, they said I didn't have enough experience. And I got to work and took the kick me sign off of our backs. I have been underestimated in everything I've ever done. And it's a blessing because it makes me scrappy. No one will outwork me in this race. No one will outsmart me in this race because we have a country to save. So if you like what I had to say today, go tell 10 people. Go tell 10 people to caucus. Go tell 10 people to go to NikkiHaley.com and volunteer. Go tell 10 people to give $5, $10, $25. Take a yard sign and let people know who you're supporting. People trust their friends and family. If you don't like what I've had to say today, shh. Just don't say anything and don't tell anyone you were here. Thank you very much. God bless you. I appreciate it.